hello again. This is week 2 of Take Action podcast. Glad to have you guys again. I'm glad we're doing this 2 weeks in a row now. Very excited. We have interesting guests today. It's Corey Reyment. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks. Excited to be here.
Yeah, I feel like I've known you your whole life.
Or you probably do. Aren't you guys brothers?
Yeah, that's my brother Corey on today. Corey's been a little bit of a motivational factor for me here over the last few years. Him and I have always pushed each other our whole lives. He's about 5 years younger than me, but he's really like the epitome of seeing a bigger picture. I mean, he's been the salesman of the year everywhere he's been for like 6 or 7 years in a row, whether it was selling nuts and bolts or, helping student athletes go to college and, selling recruiting packages. But man, he was our where I still work at NCSA. He was our salesman of the year, 4 or 5 years in a row. We'll get into that a little bit here today too, and get Corey up to that. And we're going to go through. We had an interesting question last week. We actually had a few listeners after our first week, which was pretty exciting for us, which is good. And so we'll get into that as well. Yuri, anything on your agenda?
Well, I'm super excited to see Corey. I know, Corey, you currently with Fox Cities Home Buyers, right?
Yep. On Fox Cities Home Buyers, yep.
Now, it's very exciting, and I know you've had a lot of changes in your life recently. Last time I remember when we met, you were running gym. You guys had a boot camp gym. You were helping out people get in shape.
Yep.
You were motivating them to take action, do some life changes. And I know now you're running real estate. So we really want to know what happened, what took you to take action.
Yeah, so we'll get to that here in a second, but we'll get to our listeners' question, and that came from my friend Jen, who actually did our artwork for the Take Action podcast. She's amazing. So JARP Designs in Green Bay, JARP Designs, check her out. But she had asked, how did you and Yuri meet? And I don't know if you have a better answer than I do, but I'll see what you say and then go off of that.
Well, let me think about it for a second. It's been so many years ago. I know we became such a good friends. But I do believe it was during the golf outing. You, Sergey, and Dennis, and Rudy, you guys were at the golf outing, and I suck at golf, not gonna lie. So I met you afterwards. We met at the bar, and there where friendship started.
Yeah, I think that was the first time you met me. I didn't really meet you that day because I was already 18 holes into a bar golf outing. So I think we hit it off there. But our friendship actually just kind of grew and evolved over time. I think and I don't know if this is good to put out on a podcast, but this is in our 20s, and really the first time that you and I connected was Lost Lake Day. I think that was like the first time that we really like we got along really well, but I think that's where we started broing out after that. Was you came home from work, and I think you were delivering pizzas at the time, and you brought home a case of Lost Lake beer, and we started shotgunning beers. And that was now I went to college for 5.5 years and played sports. I never shotgunned until I was like 28 or 29 years old, and Yura came in bringing in his Lost Lake, and he's like, yeah, let's do some, boys. So I think that's where it had. We had cherry bombs that night and other things, and I think that's where we started broing out. But ever since then, you and I have always connected on all different types of levels. We've gone to Canada together, fishing trips. We've done vacations together. I mean, that's I think one of the cool things about how it's evolved.
Yeah, we've been good friends for many years. Now we're a little settled down. We both have families, so it's not as many parties anymore. Lost Lake, it's kind of will be a past for us, so we don't do many shotgunning or homemade beer bong parties. But yeah, we're spending a lot of time together. Now we're doing this podcast. We're good friends.
Yeah, for sure. All right, well, let's introduce our guest. We kind of did a little bit here, but my baby brother here, he's the youngest of three, and we were all kind of brought up my parents weren't bad. Like I said last week on the podcast, they were great. I mean, they're amazing parents. They still are to this day, but they had their struggles early on. I don't think we realized growing up that's just the way that life was for us, and we never really realized like how hard our parents had to work to get us to where they came from and from where they started. And Corey, maybe you can talk on that, because I know that's been a big motivation for you, maybe even more so than me. I just thought it was the way that it was, and you saw it a little bit differently.
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head. As you know, and for all your listeners, I've always been very driven by financial goals, and it's not always a good thing to be driven by necessarily, because in my brain I've been, I guess, something triggered early on to just make sure that I was always going to be financially secure. And I think that's what's always motivated me a lot too, as you guys say, take action and just figure out a way to create some type of financial stability in our life. And I think it stemmed, I went to a Jack Canfield event, it was like 2014, I think it was, where he was speaking. And if you guys don't know Jack Canfield, he's the guy who wrote like Chicken Soup for the Soul and a lot of those books. But he was speaking, and he had us do almost like a hypnosis type of thing in the event, and he had us go back in our memory, and it was kind of weird at the time. I thought it was really cheesy, but I was like, I'll play along and I'll do 100% here, and went back in the memory, and I told Mom this afterwards, and she doesn't remember this, and again, it was probably very minute in their lifetime, but they were arguing over like a pack of crawlers. Like Dad was gonna go fishing, and they were fighting over like $2 that he spent on these crawlers, and like he stormed out and whatever, and like I never saw Dad and Mom like fight like that. They always, like, if they did, they probably did it behind closed doors or whatever. Right. They never saw it. But I remember that, and I must have been young enough where that imprinted, and I must have like made the decision, like, I'm never gonna let finances become something that I fight about when I grow up. And so I think that's always been a huge like subconscious driving factor for me in every business endeavor I ever do or anything. I don't even think about it. It's just like programmed in me from an early age to make sure financially I'm secure and I'm taking care of my family, and we don't fight about that. Now that creates other issues, but the finance part hasn't been an issue since.
Yeah, no, you've been killing it that way. Your bank account's nice and fat right now. So.
It can always be fatter.
Yeah.
Spoken like a guy who's financially driven, right? So, and I'm a little bit different. I always took it as, and I think I've always been this way growing up, and Corey can probably attest, is more like the leadership type things, the motivational type things, and almost having like that weight on my shoulders to try to make people around me better, whatever it is, whether it's a positive attitude or, other things like that. So I think that's kind of where I've gone. I'm not as motivationally driven as Corey, and anybody who sees my credit card statements will know that. But I'm trying to channel some of what his stuff is over to mine, and just how to move money around. And we'll get into some of that stuff here today too. I think that's really a pretty cool thing. So let's kind of start where, you mentioned 2014, you went for that. Mm-hmm. That's where you became motivationally driven, but you've always, or financially driven, but you've always been like, just put your head down, succeed. And I think a lot of it has to do, for those people out there who struggle, I think Corey's one of these guys where he has it. Like, and I think you always see like football players and talented athletes and people out there who just have it. Corey has it, not on the football field, although he's a decent athlete, he rolled his eyes. He's
decent. Come on, man. Come on
now. But I think he's always had like just an it factor about getting things done and making sure he naturally has some take action. But he's also learned how to build on that and not just taking his talent for granted. It's like, watching a pro athlete who has to go to the gym every day and who is super talented and uber talented, but still works on his craft all the time. So maybe, Corey, you can start with like, where you kind of realized like where you had like a natural gift, and then what you did to make it more successful.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think sales, obviously, as you talked about, has always just come natural to me. Like, it's almost to my detriment when I'm trying to train people now that I hire. I realize like it's pretty unique, and not a lot of people have this ability, to be able to sell stuff.
Yeah, you almost need a guy like me,
right? In that sense. But to that point, something else I've realized is I've always tried to make up for the things I'm not good at. And when you run a business, especially when you're a small business owner, you wear a ton of hats. You know that being from the bath renewal business. Mm-hmm. You're always trying to wear a lot of hats, and you got to be the accountant, you got to be everything. And I suck at a lot of those things, but I'm really good at sales. And so when it came to getting into real estate, I think you kind of mentioned that a little bit earlier. Something I didn't do in my early days when I had the training business is I just, like you said, I put my head down and I figured it out. And I just was like, all right, well, this will work. I found people who were willing to pay me money to make them sweat, and I just built a business around that need, and I think there's nothing wrong with that. But as now we've gotten into real estate, my wife and I, what we've done is we've just surrounded ourselves with people who've already kind of figured it out and have a blueprint or a roadmap that we can just basically copy and follow. And we've done whatever we have to do to be around those people in the industry that are at the top of the game, and done everything we can to become buddies with them, be hanging out with them, going to events with them, learning from them, not just on the business side of things, but how they operate their life, and then just emulating and copying as much of that as possible, and using my strengths and the things that they do really well to have some success. So
that's wonderful. And like I mentioned before, you had quite a switch in your career. You went from personal training to real estate, and I think you guys pretty successful. I see your Facebook posts, I see you doing training, you're doing seminars, you're trying to motivate people, help other real estate professionals and customers.
Yep.
Could you tell us more on what you guys are doing at Fox City Home Buyers?
Yeah, I mean, right now we when we got into real estate, we've done a lot of things in the business world trying to get out of the rat race of corporate America. Not that there's anything wrong with that for the people who like it. It's just not for me. I'm as my wife calls me, unemployable. You know, any job I've ever been in, I reach a success level and I kind of get bored, and then I want to like do something else, and then there's nothing else for me to do, and I'm checked out at that point. And then it starts to create some tension with myself and the employer, and I realized I'm just probably not fit to be working for somebody else anymore. And so I've always had like side gigs all the time. Like I remember one of my earliest memories of like starting a business was back, do you guys remember when you had to burn CDs?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, the Napster days, right? One of my earliest memories, and some people give me flack like, oh, you were doing illegal stuff, whatever. I'm like, whatever. I was making CDs, so was everybody else.
Right.
Big deal. I figured out a way to make $5 with putting a little bit of effort in and selling it. So I would burn CDs. That was my side hustle back then. I had like a job making pizzas at a pizza joint in Pulaski, but my side hustle was burning these CDs. And then in college, I bootlegged some vodka. Figure it out, right? Take action, right? I was bootlegging vodka because I could get access to it, and the kids in my dorm couldn't. So I mark it up, make a few bucks. I was happy. I was always doing something on the side to make extra cash. And then when I got out of college, I did an internship with the Wisconsin Badger football team in the strength and conditioning department. I realized that wasn't for me. That was like my dream job. I got it. I was there like 2 months. I'm like, this is terrible. I'm moving back home. And so I moved back home, got a sales gig. And that wasn't paying much. That was back in 08, 09 when the crash happened. And I was selling expensive fitness equipment commercially. Well, nobody had money to be buying fitness equipment. So I was straight commission. So I had to figure out a way to make some extra cash. So I'm like, well, I went to school for exercise management. I know how to personal train people. I know how to work out. Let's see if I can find somebody to pay me to do that. And I found a buddy of a buddy's dad who was going through a divorce. We started up a personal training regimen 3 times a week on the side, like in the evenings. He loved it. He got great results. So he wanted me to train his employees. That turned into like 5 days a week then of me training other people. And it kind of came into this whole boot camp. Like you said, it kind of evolved into this boot camp thing. And then, then we got, along with that, we got into some network marketing stuff where we were selling some nutritional supplements. And that was great. But then I just found I'm not good at like trying to get other people to take action necessarily. Like I'm just a driver. I'm just like, hey, I'm going to figure it out. I'll do it. Get out of my way. I'm not good at like bringing those people who don't maybe have that in them along with me. That's not a strength of mine.
Not a nurturer.
Not a nurturer. No, I'm if you're not going to do it, get out of my way. I'll figure it out kind of guy. And so network marketing, we did it for like 4 or 5 years. We had a lot of success comparatively speaking to a lot of people who try network marketing, but we liked the residual income piece of network marketing. That we were like, okay, how can we do something else that'll still give us a monthly check where we don't have to go do the business again? And that's how we came into real estate. And we read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And anybody who's thinking of real estate, you got to read that book and you'll be hooked. And you ask anybody who's successful in real estate, like 95% of them all read that book, and then it was like the trigger happened for them. So we stumbled into real estate, and when we started that, it was another thing. We just had to kind of figure it out. We didn't know anybody really that was like super successful. I had one friend who had like 50 rental units, and so I was picking his brain all the time, like trying to figure out how do you get all these rental units. And I wanted to get enough rentals that would pay, for what I was making at the job Andy was at, NCSA, where I was working. How can I get enough income coming in every month to replace that income? And we bought our first duplex in 2016, December 30th of 2016. 5 days later, we closed on our first wholesale deal. And then 3 weeks after that, we moved into our house that we live in now, and we did a lease option, which we don't have to go through the semantics of what that is, on our house that we were living in Pulaski, with a tenant buyer like 3 weeks after that. So we did like 3 different types of real estate transactions in like 3 weeks all of a sudden from doing nothing. And then we were hooked, and then it was just trying to figure out kind of what lane do we want to get into. And so now we really focus on wholesaling real estate, and then we own rentals and apartments and things like that for more of our long-term strategy. But that's really been the 2 lanes that we've decided to kind of focus on now moving forward. I know that was a long answer to the question, but that gives you hopefully a good...
Well, that was a good synopsis. Now, for those out there who don't know, what is wholesaling? Like, people have probably heard about it. They don't necessarily know about it. What is wholesaling, and, how can that be lucrative for, someone who's trying to, just maybe they're listening to this podcast and they're in their first, they're just starting to get the ball rolling. It's in real estate's a scary world because it's all big numbers, right?
Yeah.
So obviously wholesaling can be big numbers in your pocket. So tell people a little bit about wholesaling and what, just for those who don't know really what that's all about.
Yeah. So wholesaling is kind of a niche business in real estate, and there's a lot of niches in real estate where people can make a lot of money no matter what niche they get into. But wholesaling, basically what we do is we send out a lot of direct mail marketing, or we try to contact direct to seller. So we go right to the homeowners and try to find out if they're interested in maybe selling their property. And ideally what we're looking for is somebody who's got a house that needs some updating. They've got some kind of motivating factor going on in their life. They've got some medical issues happening. They've got maybe a divorce. They need to sell their property. They inherited a property, whatever the case may be. And we're basically just trying to find out how motivated are they, and we're kind of like the pawn shop of real estate, I would say.
Sure.
So they can trade their house in for speed and convenience, knowing that they're going to give up some of the potential equity. Or the other option for a lot of folks is list it with a real estate agent, but there's no guarantees in any of that stuff, and then it may sit on the market for 6 months. They may have to negotiate. They may have to do an inspection, where we just do that. And then what we'll do is we'll put together a purchase agreement with that homeowner, and then we'll take and market our contract, the purchase agreement that we have, and we'll reach out to other investors that we know are looking for rentals or flips or whatever the case may be. And basically we just keep the difference between what a buyer is willing to pay us for that contract and what the contract price is. We keep the difference between those two.
Basically, you create a bidding war with buyers. Would you say, what do you think is more important for those who want to start wholesaling? Is the marketing, which has to happen, we all know that, or having the buyer's list?
You got to have a buyer's list. I mean, when we first started, I had like 4 buyers, and I was like, I call it the buyer's bitch. I don't know if I can say that on here, but
it's podcast.
All right.
Shit, damn.
So what would happen is I'd get a property under contract, and I would call the only 4 people I knew that were possibly buying properties, and then I'd have to drive over to the property, set up a time to go through it with the seller, go through the property with that new buyer. They weren't interested, so I'd have to call the next guy, and it was just a pain in the ass. And so we don't do that anymore. Now we created a big enough buyer's list and a big enough demand that we put out our deal. It is what it is. You like it or you don't like it. We're only going there one time. You can come through it at the time we're going through the property. And if you like it, great, buy it. If you don't, there's 5 other people waiting to buy it.
So the spirit of take action. This is fun for me because I was able to see this happen. So I know a lot of the answers that I'm asking here already. But I mean, in essence, and we have a word in real estate when you're first starting out, and this goes for an agent, this goes for an investor, this goes for anybody who wants to dabble in it, but like you really have to get to a position where you're willing to eat shit for a while. And you have to understand that sacrifice. It's not a get rich quick scheme. It can be if you get lucky on the first try, but you have to take your lumps, I think. And so for you, what were some adversities that you had early on, as you got involved with this?
Well, I mean, I think, are you speaking specifically to wholesaling or just real estate?
No, just real estate in general. Like, because I think this is a lesson for a lot of our listeners out there is, maybe they're in that spot where they did start, and maybe the wheels are spinning a little bit and they're not getting anywhere. So what were some things that, you guys, really ran up against where you're like, are we doing the right thing? Is this is this right? How did you get through that?
Yeah, great question. I think, as you know us, and for your listeners that maybe don't know me, like, I'm the type of guy, and Carrie, my wife, is the same way. Like, if we have an idea or vision or something and we want to execute on it, we just start to take action, not to use the
Right.
thing of this, but we just take action, and it's always, anything new is always going to be scary. So when we started sending out our first marketing, I remember my hand was shaking when that phone rang on that first phone call. I'm like, oh crap, I don't know what I'm saying. I don't know anything about real estate. And all these limiting beliefs, started coming into my head about, like, I don't even know what a water heater looks like, for God's sake. How am I supposed to talk about the condition of this property? And what I realized is, like, you can't say the wrong thing to the right person. And so what I mean by that is, we would have these motivated sellers, and I could fumble through my script, and at the end of it, they're begging me to buy their house, basically. And I'm going, oh my gosh, this is like real. This happens. So then the next step was going to look at a property and set up a time. And again, I'm kind of, as I'm doing this stuff, I'm kind of making it up as I go, fake it till you make it sort of thing. But I'm learning as I'm going through the process, and I'm understanding, like, okay, on this phone call, I said that was probably really stupid. Don't say that again. Then I'll go and look at the property, and I'm like, I get my contractor then to go through it. He's like, oh yeah, this is going to be X amount of dollars, whatever. And I'm like, oh crap, I totally missed that. Well, the next time I go through a property and I see that same thing, now I know. So it was a lot of just like trial and error, kind of like fail forward, make a mistake, but then learn from it,
Right.
and don't make that same mistake again. And then getting our first property, that duplex, was probably like the biggest turning point in our life, because when I did that, and our strategy was to buy it with private money or hard money, and then refinance with a traditional lender after we had done some updates and repairs, and pull all of that cash back out. And when it worked, like almost to the dollar, like it triggered in my brain that, holy crap, like now this is unstoppable. We can do this a million times. But the hardest one was doing that first deal.
And is there anybody specific who actually influencing you in real estate?
Like our mentors.
Or the mentors. You said when you were switching, when you were looking for a career change, you mentioned your friend who had 50 units. Would be this friend your main influencer, or you had somebody famous, maybe?
Yeah, no, I mean, locally, Tony Breyer, if you guys don't know Tony, he's an awesome dude.
Yeah.
He does hard money lending in town and mortgages. And I was in a networking group with this guy for like 2.5 years. And all he would talk about is mortgages. Like, hey, I'm Tony, I do mortgages. Well, then as I started to learn from him.
If he listens to this, he's going to start laughing.
He is, because he knows that's exactly what he says. I could probably say his whole 60-second speech because I heard it so many times. But then I learned, as I got to know him more personally, we realized we had a lot of stuff in common, and we liked a lot of the same things. We started to hang out outside of that. He starts just sprinkling in that he owns like 50 or 60 rentals. And I'm going, what? How is this, how did you do that? And I've always had this interest in real estate. I just never pursued it. And so as I was around him more, and I saw just kind of the lifestyle he was living, and like, he's not as big of a, like driver as I am, I would say, where
Right.
he doesn't need to go conquer the world like me. He's just happy, like, going on vacation every couple weeks, and he's cool with making sure his bills are paid and all that kind of stuff. Now, he does very well for himself, but you wouldn't know it maybe looking at him from the outside. He was a huge influence for me locally. And then we started to find, as I mentioned earlier, we started to find, like, once we realized like wholesaling was something we really wanted to focus on in the real estate world, we started to reach out and find some of the top people in wholesaling and just learn and do whatever we have to do from them. And then the same thing in multifamily. That's something this year, multifamily apartments that we've really started to dive more into. We've purchased 3 apartments this year, and we plan to purchase a lot more. So I sought out and found the person who's killing it, growing the fastest in the country, and I'm going to meet with him here in a couple weeks to pick his brain. And I had to pay him a decent sum of money to sit with him for a day, but now I'm going to have access to him, and he's going to be like, I'll have his cell phone, I can call him, we can joint venture deals, all those sort of things. So, as I mentioned earlier, that was one of the biggest things I've learned in my short life here, is just find somebody who's killing it in whatever area you want to be killing it in, and go learn from them and do what they do.
Yeah, I think that's the essence of, what you just said right there. Is this is the essence of the Take Action podcast. Isn't about, of course, we're going to have real estate people on here, probably a lot, because I think real estate people are the ones that do have a lot of drivers. But that goes for anybody. Anybody out there who wants to pick up a hobby and starts falling in love with it and sees that, like, holy cow, I can make this something for myself. Go and find whoever the most successful people are in that industry. Reach out to them, pick their brain. What you'll find is the most successful people, at least for me, that I've found, and maybe I haven't found the most successful people, but just in anything, like, they're willing to share.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's a give back mentality with people who are successful, and it's natural because they're the best at what they do, and they realize, that somebody's probably not going to be as good as them, and they're probably not going to be real competition, but at the same time, they're willing to have that give back and share. I think for people like that, they're extremely confident. There's an essence about them. And I think there's a confidence about them to just say, yeah, dude, whatever. Mm-hmm. I'll tell you this, you're probably not going to do it because 90% of the people I tell this to aren't going to do it. But for those people who are out there willing to give that information and you're willing to take action on it, I think is awesome.
And I think there's another local mentor here, Caleb Hayes. If you guys don't know Caleb, he's in the Green Bay market. He's younger than I am, and he's built incredible businesses, not just a business. Like, he has multiple businesses, and he kills it here. And he was one that he was another local mentor. I didn't really know him before we got into real estate, and as I was into it, kept hearing his name drop and all this sort of stuff. And we went and sat down with him, and he was just awesome. Like, he helped us so much on so many business structuring things, like what CRM to use, or how to get a CRM, to get a bookkeeper, to do all these other things that would free us up to get us to this level that we are today. We wouldn't be even close to where we are without being able to sit down with him. And like every month he would meet with us and like didn't charge us anything. It was just like him giving back, and it was immensely helpful. And all he would ask is that we did whatever he told us to do, and if we didn't do it within that month, don't come back for the next meeting.
Yeah,
so
it
was
great.
super
motivating. Yeah, he's a take action guy.
Yeah,
it's
like, you're not going to do it, don't show up for the next meeting.
Yeah, because he's not going to waste his time.
Exactly.
He's willing to help if you're willing to take action. He's not, and I appreciate that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty wonderful story from Corey here. I'm pretty sure, as you mentioned before, when you started real estate, you didn't know what you're doing, but you took action, you learned other tips and tricks from people, you became friends, you build up your networking here. So that's pretty amazing story. And for some of our listeners, we want to bring a guest on the show like Corey, who's motivated. I'm pretty sure you were scared at some point.
Every day I get scared to do it.
Every day you're scared, yes, but you go, you do it, you take action.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's wonderful example.
Yeah. I actually like losing now. Not to the point where I get crushed.
Right.
But I actually like getting beat because I found for me, like, that's something that's like, okay, you might beat me once, but it's not happening again.
Right.
Or you're just going to keep making me better and better and better until I get to your level. So, like, those are things that I like to do. Like, I'm sure, what do they call it? Like the 5% rule or something like that. So 5% of people that actually listen to our podcast are going to like it. That means 95% of people aren't going to like it, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Like, I've learned to be okay with that and not be scared of it anymore because I've been kicked in the balls too many times that it doesn't matter anymore anyway.
Well, I think you're a good example too, and I tell us a lot of people come to us now locally for help on getting started in real estate, and again, the same thing. We're very happy to share because we want to help people get started because it helps our business if we have investors buying, but also it's just fun for us to see new people get into it and have success. But one of the things that we do a little local seminar talking to people about basically how to get started in real estate. We don't charge anything for it or anything like that.
Right.
But the biggest takeaway we tell everybody is just get started. Buy a deal. If you want to get into real estate, get one. Don't be dumb, but make a smart decision or as smart of a decision as you think you can. Buy one and do a flip or do a rental or whatever and figure it out, because that was, for me, the biggest takeoff point was getting that first one and realizing, oh, it's not that scary. And then then the next one was easier, and the next one was easier, and then pretty soon we were doing like 5 flips in 1 month, and I'm like, what the hell happened? We went from like one every 4 months to now condensing that and just doing a lot more volume. But whatever you're trying to do, I think that's the biggest thing, is just get out there and take action, because I would say 99% of people don't.
Right.
So it's not that hard to be good.
Well, I think that's the biggest point of this is it's a lot of people complain and blame, and and the only ones that really you have to blame is yourself. When you look in the mirror, for me, I lost, like you had mentioned, go out there and do your first flip. Well, my first flip, I just finally sold it about a month and a half ago, and I lost money on it, like $1,000 or $2,000. But I also gained on it. I gained, number one, a massive amount of education on, things that can go right and things that can go wrong. I've gained a lot, even though I have a contracting background from the past, which certainly helped me out a little bit, but I learned who's loyal, who's going to say and do what they say they're going to do. You know, I learned the guys who are showing up on the jobs, who are enthusiastic about it, who actually enjoy the work that they do. Like, I always have a motto now when I hire somebody to do something for me, especially if they're a contractor, the nerdier the better.
Right.
Because if they're nerdy about it, that means they love it. If they go over my head on explaining things, I'll tell them to dumb it down a little bit, but like, to me, that they're experts then, and they're passionate about it, and those are the kinds of guys I'm looking for. You know, the guys who show up, you know, and then, well, maybe I'll be there next week, maybe I won't be there. I thank them. You know, I thank them for their time. I thank them for showing me that I don't want to work with them anymore. Because I just don't have time for that. And those are the things that I think you learn and you gain in whatever you do.
Right.
Again, it's not like Corey's motivated me to take action on real estate, but I got all sorts of hobbies. I'm all over the place with different things, and you know, that's the fun part about it, is just trying new things until you find your niche, and once you do, go after it.
Yep. Totally.
So Corey, I guess, you know, we'll get close to wrapping up here, but you know, one of the questions that that I have for you is how can people find you? Like, if they want to ask questions, you know, you want to send them to your Fox Cities Homebuyer website. You have a Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. What do you got?
Yeah, probably just find me on Facebook. That's probably where I'm the most active on there. So it's just, I think if you just put my name in, Corey, Corey, Reyment, Reyment, and then find me on there. I've got a more of like a real estate focused business page. So it's Corey Reyment, Wisconsin Discount Properties. That's more geared towards our investors and buyers and things like that. And I'll post stuff on there more specific to real estate on there, motivational, money management, things like that. But otherwise, if you just want to interact.
Yeah, and you mentioned you have a monthly meeting for newbies. You know, I mean, obviously, you know, anybody in Green Bay, it'll be easy to get there. But for anybody who's willing to come, you know, out of the area, I know Corey's looking to expand apartment buildings, things like that. You know, if somebody wants to make the trek in, you know, where do you have these meetings? What day of the month or whatever do you have them?
You know, the best place would be just find me on Facebook and shoot me a friend request, and then ask to be included on those. We also have a group that we can put you into on Facebook that's just specific to that, because we don't have like a set day of the week, month, or whatever. It varies depending on. We try not to do them too often where we're going to get the same people that came last time aren't going to get any value out of it. We want them to get out there, take action, and then come back to the next one. And even though it might be very similar information, they're going to learn something new at the next one because they've actually been out applying some of the things that they've been using. So it varies. Just find it on Facebook. Find me on Facebook, and we can invite you to the group.
And then for a segment we're going to try out here, and we're going to put our guys on the spot here. We're going to flip it around. We're going to let you ask questions.
Oh, geez.
So if you have a question for Yura or myself or...
Yeah, I guess my question is, why did you start the podcast? What was it that drove you guys to start this podcast?
You want to take that? I have my own answer.
Yeah, I have my own answer too. Just gotta think about it for a second.
We
mentioned all of this in the starting of our podcast. I'm assuming we were in the same spot, very similar situation with me and Monte. When we were doing things, we were kind of doing a lot, but it didn't seem to be enough. We needed a push. We needed to do something different, and we wanted to help people. Not everyone can just get up and start doing things by themselves. It takes a lot of time. For a lot of us, it takes a lot of courage too. So one of our main goals is for people to grow with us, for our listeners to get up, stand up, and take action.
Yeah, and for me, a lot has to do with that. Now, selfishly, I started the podcast, or I thought of the idea about a year ago, reading my main influencer, aside from, you know, people in my personal life. But, you know, a couple of years ago, I saw a video on Facebook from Gary Vee. And, you know, he started swearing in the video. So I'm like, all right, I'm listening. You know, but when you get past the swear words and you listen to the messaging that he's talking about, you know, a lot of what you're going to hear from me is somewhat influenced from him, not to try to be a copycat. I can't be Gary Vee. You know, Gary Vee's not going to be me. He's far more successful than I am right now. But so I started listening to his things, you know, just, you know, here and there. And then I actually read his book called Crushing It. And in there was a section about podcasting and about personal branding. And at that time I was just, you know, kind of really getting my feet wet. I was into my first flip. I was having fun doing videos on YouTube and Facebook and seeing the comments and the feedback and learning. And then I got to another point where the lyrics in the song Glorious by Macklemore, where he said, "You died twice. It's the first time they bury you, and the second time's the last time that somebody mentions your name."
So good.
And that really hit my chord. It was like, maybe I'm looking at this the wrong way. Maybe what I'm doing is like, of course I want to be influential and I want to have positive things, but like for me, it was for myself fulfillment. And so now like that, those couple of things were like, all right, let's twist this up a little bit and let's just not make this about me. I mean, I'm sure you reap what you sow, right?
Right.
So for me was, what can I put out there to hopefully motivate some people? It'll make me feel good. So that's my selfish thing. But at the same time, it's going to get other people to do that, which in turn is you're influencing more people to do good than just myself to do good. So that was the reason why. And Yuri's been, doing a wonderful job helping me market on social media for my real estate company. And him and I both, it was weird because we both looked at each other. We had a meeting at my house in the backyard. And we both looked at each other and we said, I said, what's the next step? And like I said, I'd like to do, and he like came out of his mouth before and he's like, podcast. I'm like, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah. Well,
So-
you know what they say, great minds think alike.
Yeah,
so,
right. Well, we'll see
here
about
we are.
that.
Yeah.
So that's how we started the podcast.
Yeah, that quote's awesome from Macklemore, and I think like Jim Rohn, that's a guy who I think
Not Jim Rome.
not Jim Rohn, the sports guy, Jim Rohn. I think is a great example, and he's got a great book. I think it's like Life of Influence or something like that I'm reading right now. But he's a great guy. I think he's dead, but people still read his stuff. They still quote him, and he always talks about providing more value than what you get in return in exchange. And that's this whole, like your quote is perfect. If you guys provide a ton of value to people, whatever direction it's going to go, it's going to go. And
Yeah.
you'll get something back down the road. But
Yeah, I mean, we're just having fun
Yeah.
right now. It's like, we get a chance to bring you in and talk to you about it. And, Yura's learning. He's in a transition in his life where his daughter is going to be in kindergarten next year. So he needs to lay the foundation for whatever he wants to do afterwards. And we talked a lot about that last week. And, obviously I don't know where the hell I'm going. I'm just having fun and trying to do as many things as possible, build my real estate empire, help as many kids as I can. And, and that's what, that's what we're here to do.
sweet. Love it, guys. Well, I love the podcast. I love what you guys are doing. I love the theme, the take action theme, and I think there's a lot of people out there. Obviously, like we said, there's not a lot of people that take action. So if you guys can be a positive influence just to get them to take one step forward from where they were, then you guys are successful.
Yeah, by no means are we experts. We're going to fall on our face. I know it. We did last week when we taped our first podcast and it didn't record.
Yeah.
I tell you what,
Technical difficulties.
There's some of the most
yeah.
successful podcasters out there that are just like you guys. They didn't know what the hell they were doing. Most people never took a class for how to podcast, so they just started taking action, and it's it'll grow, and you guys will do awesome.
Yeah.
And that's a whole theme of our podcast. Do we know what we're doing? No. Am I scared and nervous? Yes. But we taking action and we trying to change it. We trying to get out of there and help you guys.
Yeah. One of my local national mentors is one of his sayings when you start this coaching program is take massive imperfect action, and I love that because it's never going to be perfect.
That GC.
No, Tom Kroll.
Oh.
Yeah. Take massive imperfect action. So, love it, guys.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Corey, for coming on this week. Next week, we already have another interesting man. He might be even a little bit more interesting than Corey. Billy Sims.
No
Not
way.
hard to beat.
No
Not hard to
way.
beat. So Billy Sims will be joining us next week on our podcast, episode number 3. I'm excited to see the feedback, guys. Of course, if you have any feedback, positive, negative, let us know. We're always going to try to be a little bit better each week, but we'll let it roll out here. Yura, you got anything?
Yeah, thank you guys for tuning in. Today was our second podcast. It went pretty good. Thank you for your time, Corey. I'm pretty sure you're busy all the time. You have family, you have your business to run, but you made an appearance.
Yeah.
Today's show was wonderful. Make sure you check out Corey's website, his Instagram and Facebook page, or make sure you like our podcast. You can find us on Facebook. It's Take Action with Monte and Yura. We recently started a Captivate. It's a web service to store our podcast so you'll get some analytics. And once again, guys, we're gonna try to make it more interesting. We're gonna keep bringing guests, and we want you to send us questions. We want your feedback. We want to be more interactive with our listeners. Thank you.
All right, guys, have a great week.